Revenge with Karen.
I knew the empire ran on paper cuts and post-its the day I pulled a draft contract from the shredder with my bare hands, because our intern fed the only signed copy through at 5:58 p.m. on a Friday. Blood, toner, and rage. Just another day in legal ops. You ever bandage your thumb with a sticky note while emailing a state regulator about compliance wording for a merger clause you wrote, only to have your CEO ask if you could grab him a la croix since you're headed that way? That's where I lived. That's who I was. The backbone no one noticed until it cracked. I'm Jennifer. I've been director of legal operations here for 11 years, 7 months, and some change, though no one's counting, least of all the execs I've shepherded through more deals than I've had hot meals. I've built this company's internal control processes from a haunted Excel sheet and a prayer. I've rewritten our vendor protocols mid-flight, literally, from a Wi-Fi connection over Phoenix, because our CTO clicked on a phishing link. I've held this company's legal spine together with the kind of quiet precision you only get from being overlooked for 3 straight promotions, and deciding silence was easier than small talk with men named Troy. Every filing, every clause, every compliance time-stamped with the accuracy of a Swiss watch, but no gold plaque, no LinkedIn shout-out. No, couldn't have done it without her, and that's fine. I didn't do it for the applause. I did it because someone had to, and maybe I was okay being invisible. Until the day they tried to delete me completely. Before I take you into that boardroom, before I lay the seal down and watch their faces melt, just do me one favor. If you've ever been the one who actually kept things running while someone else took the mic and the bonus, hit that like button, maybe even subscribe. It tells the team this kind of story matters, and hell, it helps me keep telling it without needing another sticky note tourniquet. Now back to the quiet corner I called home. My office is what you'd call post-apocalyptic chic. Filing cabinets from the Clinton era. A printer that sounds like it's fighting demons. Coffee rings on the desk from cups I forgot I poured. But it's mine, tucked between HR's Cumbea Palace and the server room that smells like fried despair. It's where deals were born. Big ones. Like the acquisition we'd been working on for the past 14 months, an 8-figure merger with a coastal firm so uptight they probably audited their coffee filters. I wrote the legal spine for that deal. The clause flow, the regulatory filings, the compliance schedule. Whole damn schema passed through me like some kind of bureaucratic digestive tract. Nothing moved without my initials. I don't say that to brag. I say it because, well, you'll see why soon. What I loved about legal ops was the elegance of it. The rhythm, the orchestration. While the rest of the company played ping pong with KPIs and OCRs, I was weaving the safety net that kept us out of the headlines. I didn't need glory. I needed quiet, precision, control. Most days I wore black slacks, a blouse, and a face that said no, I'm not here to explain the fax machine again. My inbox was a war zone of last-minute panic. Jennifer, do we need to file Form 10Q for the acquisition sub? Jennifer, is this indemnity clause enforceable in Vermont? Jennifer, can you retype this page with fewer legal words? Yes, Dave. I'll just make the merger agreement sound more like a Hallmark card. I kept my head down, not because I lacked ambition, but because I knew where power really lived. Not on the stage, not in the Slack channel with the most emojis, but in the footnotes, in the signatory tokens and procedural gates. I knew that without certain signatures, that merger would die in federal paperwork hell. And one of those signatures was mine. Of course, they didn't know that. Not yet. The CEO, Mitchell, just call me Mitch Harlan, made it clear I wasn't part of the core strategy team. Too blunt, he said. Not agile enough. I once told him his email tone was legally actionable. I guess he never let that go, so I stayed off the radar. Let the strategist types run their war games while I ensured the battlefield was actually legal. And while they were drinking artisanal cold brew and mistaking flair for function, I tucked a little clause into the merger protocol that would, hypothetically, require my seal for final release. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, my ass. It was real. It was signed. It was binding. But I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because during an audit last year, I watched our compliance VP, now happily unemployed, nearly tank a minor acquisition by skipping a required environmental review. I wrote the seal clause to prevent that kind of ego-driven shortcut from happening again. It wasn't personal. Till it was. Until I got that email. Until someone decided I was non-essential. And that's when things got interesting. It landed at 8:04 a.m. Subject line, merger finalization call calendar invite update. The kind of sterile corporate fart that means someone got cut and nobody wants to admit it. I clicked out of muscle memory while choking down instant oatmeal and my third coffee. The message was from Troy, of course it was. VP of Strategy, self-anointed prince of spreadsheets, the kind of man who thinks synergy is a mating ritual. Per updated agenda, he wrote, non-essential staff may skip the merger finalization call at 10:30 a.m. Attendance limited to strategic stakeholders, buyer-side counsel, and signing authorities. No greeting, no sign-off. Just that, non-essential. It wasn't even bolded. Just a sentence buried between logistics about Zoom links and slide decks. Like I wouldn't notice. Like it wouldn't register that non-essential was code for you. The same woman who wrote the compliance framework, who outlined the signing procedure, who literally authored the flowchart being used to guide the call. I stared at the screen until the cursor blurred. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Elise, our junior paralegal. Hey, super sorry if you weren't on the original invite. Just wanted you to have these notes for reference. Open the attachment. Meeting agenda. Slide previews. A bullet point under legal review that just said, Troy plus external counsel. No, Jennifer, I didn't cry. I didn't throw my mug. I just sat very still and felt something inside me freeze. Not break, not shatter. Just turn to ice. I'd spent months drafting the language for this deal. Dozens of late nights revising interagency timelines, redlining subclauses, building the crosswalk between federal compliance and state-level disclosures. I knew the merger better than the buyer did. Hell, I probably knew the buyer better than Troy did. And now I was being ghosted like some Tinder date who quoted tax code at dinner. I reread the sentence again. Non-essential staff may skip the merger finalization call. The insult was surgical. I wasn't laid off. I wasn't demoted. I wasn't even addressed. I was simply deleted. Strategically, smoothly, like wiping metadata from a Word doc. It takes a special kind of corporate cowardice to erase someone mid-deal. Especially when that someone holds the legal token that makes the whole machine move. And here's the funny part. They forgot the clause. Not a big flashy clause. Not a must-be-signed in blood kind of clause. Just a quiet little requirement buried in the merger checklist that said, final regulatory release shall be issued upon execution and seal by the Director of Legal Operations, per Protocol 4C, as amended in Q3 last. Guess who wrote Protocol 4C? Guess who amended it? Guess who's the only person who knows where the seal is and how the signatory token even works? Because Troy thought it was just for decoration and tried to use it once as a paperweight. You guessed it, me. I stood up. Calm, clinical, walked to the legal vault, punched in my 6-digit code, and opened the case marked Signatory Materials Restricted. Inside was a small black box, sleek, heavy, embossed with our company's legal crest and my initials. I took out the seal, polished brass, cold to the touch. Still smelled faintly of toner and permanence, and I took the token. It looked like a fob, but it wasn't. It held a unique cryptographic code tied to my biometric data. It had to be present, physically, when the signing session was authenticated. Without it, the entire merger file couldn't be finalized through the state portal. Security overkill, they said. Jennifer's being paranoid, they said. Why can't we just use DocuSign? Because DocuSign doesn't cover your ass in a courtroom when the buyer's side tries to sue over missed filings and someone's name isn't on the registry. I closed the vault, locked it, walked back to my desk and placed the box in my drawer. Didn't say a word. The rest of the morning, emails flew by, thanks all. Excited for today's call. Big moment for the company. My phone stayed quiet. No one asked if I was joining. No one noticed the clause had a heartbeat till I made sure they heard it flatline. I didn't forward the email to HR. I didn't reply all with a passive-aggressive thanks for the heads up. I didn't stomp into Mitch's office demanding recognition. That's what they expect women like me to do, shriek, spiral, self-implode. Instead, I opened my document archive, clicked into the folder titled M and a term sheet final real final 2, because God forbid anyone clean up versioning, and I read, not skimming, not scanning. I read every inch of that bastard like it owed me money, and there it was. Page 47, second subsection under execution procedures. My fingerprint still fresh in the language. Per Protocol 4C, final release of compliance documents and state-level merger authentication shall require validation by Director of Legal Operations via corporate seal and biometric signatory token. It didn't say may, didn't say optional, it said shall. There was no backup name, no deputy, no workaround. I'd written it after our last acquisition nearly burned to the ground because some genius VP decided to move fast and forgot the federal escrow release. The fallout gave us 3 weeks of legal migraines and a politely worded threat from the state attorney's office. So I created a clause. Quiet, durable, unmistakable. And now it was the fuse. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light hummed like it was in on the joke. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. The kind of stillness right before a thunderclap. My heartbeat was steady, almost bored. That's what happens when a woman learns, after a decade of eating crap with a plastic spoon, that she's been holding the silverware drawer the whole time. I walked back to the vault. Code: 4 to 9 to 7 to 2 to 6 to 1. Same 6 digits I used for everything, because if anyone in this place wanted to steal from me, they'd already done it in bonuses and credit. The lock clicked open. The box was heavier than I remembered, sleek, matte black. I opened it gently like it was alive. Inside, nestled in velvet, sat the corporate seal and the token. The two things no one else in this office could replicate without a subpoena and a miracle. The seal was old school, brass, circular, graved with our firm's Latin motto, per legem vincimus, which roughly translates to through law we prevail, though at this point it felt more like through law we delay payroll. The token was newer, digital but paired with my biometrics. Without my print and physical presence, the final signature on the merger couldn't be registered with the state portal. That wasn't a threat. That was engineering. That was control. I slid both items into a zippered leather case and walked deliberately back to my office. Shut the door, turned the blinds, sat, placed the case in the middle of my desk like an altar. Then I smiled. The kind of smile you give before flipping the breaker. Troy was probably pacing around the conference room right now, checking his teeth in his phone camera, practicing buzzwords like value-aligned synergy. He had no clue the whole show was missing a lead actor. They thought I'd watch from the sidelines, grateful to still be in the building. Let them try without me. I made no announcement. No righteous monologue, just silence. Silence and the slow sip of stale coffee while I triple-checked the authentication flow in the signing portal. It flagged me by name as the required witness and signatory for all final merger documents. No overrides allowed, no substitutions. God bless redundancy protocols. They protect companies from rogue execs. And sometimes protect one woman from being erased. By 10 o'clock, the flurry of joining soon, and excited to finalize, emails started hitting my inbox like confetti. Troy's out-of-office auto-reply had kicked in early. He always did that, like he was boarding a yacht, not a Zoom call. A junior finance analyst I barely knew messaged me, "Hey Jennifer, quick question about payment sequencing post-merger. Should I route that through the buyer or our side?" I replied, "Depends on who signs first." She reacted with a thumbs up. She didn't know I meant it as a warning. The moment the call began, the clock started ticking. Not toward the company's biggest deal, but toward a collision. Between what they thought they could get away with and the quiet claws I'd left waiting in the shadows. The door to the boardroom was propped open just enough to hear them laughing. Troy's voice, smooth and slippery like an overripe banana. "We're just waiting on final review from buyer's counsel. Should be a clean signature." Mitch, our CEO, chimed in next. "Yup, Jennifer's tied up with other priorities." A pause, chuckles, someone coughed. That's when I decided I wasn't going to knock. You have to understand, the boardroom is sacred. Vaulted ceilings, faux mahogany table long enough to park a minivan on. Only room in the building where they still pretend to use coasters. It's where dreams go to get funded or quietly buried under revised projections. No one walks into that space uninvited. No one except the woman holding the damn detonator. I stepped in mid-sentence. Troy's hand was extended toward the acquirer's lawyer, pen already uncapped. He froze midair like I'd just pulled a fire alarm. Mitch looked up, blinked twice. I saw his jaw tighten when he realized it was me. The intern working the Zoom laptop instinctively minimized the screen. I didn't sit. I didn't say hello. I walked to the center of the table, past a pitcher of untouched cucumber water and a tray of sad mini croissants, and placed the leather case down like I was delivering a verdict. Unzipped it, removed the brass seal and the biometric token. Set them side by side, gently, so they gleamed under the overhead lights. I said it, quiet, even, "Then you can proceed without this." It hit like thunder in a chapel. The acquirer's lawyer, a sharp woman in a navy pinstripe who looked like she hadn't blinked since law school, slowly lowered her pen. Her eyes flicked to the token, then to me, then back to Mitch. "I'm sorry," she said, measured and calm. "What exactly is that?" Troy started speaking too fast. "Oh, it's just a ceremonial thing, our internal ops seal, you know. Legacy optics." I cut him off. Still calm, still steady. "That's the corporate seal registered with the state, and the token is required for signatory authentication through the merger portal. Without it, nothing you sign today will be legally executed." Dead. Silence. One of the board members, a man who once asked me if the cloud was a physical building, leaned forward, squinting. "Is that true?" The buyer's lawyer was already on her laptop, scrolling through the documents. "Clause 47, she murmured. I said nothing. I just stood there, arms at my sides, letting them read the writing on the tombstone. Mitch finally found his voice. "Jennifer, this isn't the time for what?" I tilted my head. "For doing the job you didn't want me at the table for. Because I wrote that clause. And the process you're attempting to complete without me requires a multi-factor authentication using my signature and my seal, which, until 2 minutes ago, was in a locked vault that only I had access to." Troy's face had gone from smug to might vomit. The buyer's team exchanged glances. Their senior counsel turned to her associate and whispered something. A laptop closed. Someone stood up. The room changed temperature. The acquirer's lead lawyer cleared her throat. "We'll need to pause. Our legal team requires clarification on signatory protocol before we proceed." Mitch started to object. She cut him off. "If this clause is in force, and appears to be, it invalidates any signature executed today without the required authorization. We will not proceed until that is resolved." And just like that, the energy shifted. From them to me, no yelling, no gavel bang. Just a sudden, clinical awareness that the woman they deemed non-essential was now the axis holding their entire multimillion-dollar fantasy together. I turned without another word and walked to the side of the room. I didn't leave. I didn't need to. I just stood there, seal and token resting on polished wood, watching the power rearrange itself in real time. They forgot who built the locks. They forgot who held the keys. Now they remembered. The silence was sticky. The kind that clings to your skin and makes even the air taste like regret. You could hear someone's smartwatch buzzing, probably Troy's, set to remind him to crush the call. The buyer's counsel hadn't sat back down, was staring across the table, pen motionless above her pad, brows tightened like she was trying to remember where in the stack of documents the ghost clause had hidden. Then she asked it, loud enough to slice the quiet clean in half. "Who is she?" Her finger pointed at me, but her eyes were locked on Mitch, who looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. He laughed, a weak, wet chuckle that dripped insecurity. "Oh, that's just Jennifer. She handles our legal ops, she handles them." Lawyer repeated, her voice still flat, but now carrying that awful legal edge. "Or she's in charge of them." Troy jumped in like a golden retriever, sensing its owner was about to get sued. "She's head of internal legal logistics. But for strategy and execution, we have our team." I'd heard enough. I pulled the folder from my bag. No dramatic flourish, no slamming it down like a scene from a courtroom show. Just opened it, found the tab, began reading aloud in the kind of voice that was always calm because it had to be. Per revised merger protocol 4C, clause 47, final release of regulatory filings, state-level authentication, and interagency merger verification shall be authorized via physical seal and biometric token of the Director of Legal Operations, currently assigned to Jennifer Lynn Strauss, effective as of July 1st of last year. I paused, let it breathe, could feel it settle over the room like fog. The buyer's lawyer blinked once, then looked at her team, then turned back to Mitch. "Did you, or did you not, communicate to us that your side had no remaining contingencies regarding signatory compliance?" Mitch squirmed. "Well, I mean, technically, yes or no, Mr. Harlan." He fumbled. "We believed, Troy assured me that, your team withheld material information regarding a regulatory dependency." She turned to me, all pretense now gone. "Miss Strauss, have you been provided full access to the signing portal, transaction oversight tools, and compliance calendar for this merger?" I smiled, polite as poison. "No. In fact, I was explicitly excluded from the finalization call. After designing the entire execution framework, I was classified, per internal memo, as non-essential." A whisper of gasps. Associate beside the lead lawyer was already typing like her life depended on it. The lawyer nodded once. Then, as lead counsel for the acquiring party, I am halting this session, effective immediately. We will not proceed until Miss Strauss is granted full access, and her authority is reflected in all legal documentation and operational workflows per Clause 47. She turned to her team. Flag the clause. Cross-reference state requirements. Pull up prior mergers for protocol alignment. Troy looked like he'd been hit with a tranquilizer dart. Mitch muttered something under his breath, something that sounded like, wasn't supposed to matter. I sat down, not at the far end, right at the center. I didn't ask. I didn't wait for permission. I simply placed my folder beside the seal and looked up at the buyer's team. If you'd like, I said, I can walk you through the compliance timeline, the integration structure, the 3 bottlenecks your current plan hasn't accounted for. The lead counsel gave the faintest smile. Please do. And just like that, I was no longer the extra seat. I was the architect. They didn't see the crown, but they all damn sure felt the weight of it. And the queen, she was no longer waiting for a throne. She built the room. Miss Strauss, the buyer's counsel said, folding her hands like a judge about to deliver a sentence. You explain the origin of Clause 47? I didn't blink. I'd been waiting 2 years to be asked. Certainly, I said, and flipped open the second folder in my bag, labeled 2023 Audit Findings, confidential in a font I chose specifically because I knew Troy would never read anything that didn't look like a PowerPoint. It started with the acquisition of Kelport Systems. Small operation, no real digital infrastructure, mostly paper records and a nephew running IT from his garage. Harmless, right? Except someone in finance skipped a required vendor reassessment, and we discovered, post-signature, that Kelport had failed 2 federal disclosures involving EPA compliance. That mistake cost us 3 weeks of filings, delayed integration by a month, and put us on a short list we never wanted to be on. I turned the page. Graphs, penalties, fines. Color started to drain from the CFO's face. After that disaster, we initiated a complete overhaul of compliance procedures. I worked with outside counsel and the state's regulatory board to draft what became Protocol 4C, a required multi-point validation layer that included, among other things, a named signatory to act as the final control against incomplete execution. I met Mitch's eyes. That signatory was me. Troy cleared his throat. Isn't that clause more of a formality? I mean, it's not like the buyer's lawyer cut him off so hard I thought his soul detached. No, it's not a formality. State and federal regulations both require final signatory authority on merger execution filings to be documented and compliant with the company's own internal protocols. You built your house on this clause. She is the legal keystone. Their associate, still typing, confirmed it without looking up. She doesn't sign, the merger's not legal. And if they attempt to file without her, it's fraud. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. The clause did it for me. I continued. I designed it to prevent ego-driven shortcuts. We were growing fast, too fast. There were incentives to cut corners. And the board, I turned slightly to glance down the line of them, suits suddenly far too stiff for the temperature, approved every change. This isn't a rogue clause. This is company policy, codified, registered, in force. The room shifted again, but this time it wasn't panic, it was calculation. You could see the gears turning behind the buyer's eyes. The realization that they weren't just buying a company. They were stepping into a hornet's nest of internal politics and silent wars, and that the only person with a damn map was the woman they'd been told to ignore. Mitch tried damage control. Of course, Jennifer's work has always been appreciated. We just assumed Troy had incorporated her into the final phase. Troy looked like someone had tasered his liver. I mean, I thought the clause was like part of the background protocol. Not a gate, I echoed. That's right, it's a vault, and I have the key. The lead buyer counsel stood, walked slowly around the table, looked down at the documents again, then directly at me. I want you in every call going forward. Integration planning, compliance review, board alignment, everything, effective immediately. She turned to Mitch, now chewing the inside of his cheek like it owed him money. You told us she wasn't strategic. I now believe you misrepresented your organizational dependencies. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Just that soft exhale of a man watching his leverage dissolve like sugar in hot coffee. I leaned back. Let them scramble. Let them pretend they were still driving the ship. Because they'd finally realized what I always knew. The quiet woman in the back, the one who remembered every dotted I and footnote, was the only reason this thing hadn't sunk already. and now that they'd heard my voice, they couldn't unhear it. The door was halfway open when the buyer's associate leaned toward her lead counsel and whispered, not quietly enough, should she leave? The lead shook her head. She stays. That was it. No grand announcement. No HR memo. Just two words that rearranged the tectonic plates in that room. I stayed. I didn't rush to speak. I didn't bask in the glow. I just sat back down, flipped open my annotated transition manual, and waited for them to catch up to the deal I'd already mapped out 3 quarters ago. My coffee had gone cold. I drank it anyway. The buyer's integration lead, sharp woman named Darnell who hadn't said a word up to this point, adjusted her glasses and looked at me like someone realizing the blueprint had a heartbeat. Can you walk us through the compliance rollout sequence? I nodded. We've staged it in 3 tiers: pre-merger, mid-integration, and post-transfer stabilization. Each tier aligns with reporting obligations and functional ownership migration. The first phase is already in motion. It just wasn't told if anyone here remembered it. That got a few smirks. Not from the board, God no, they were still busy sweating through their J-crew, but from the acquirer's people. The ones who knew what mattered. Darnell scribbled something, then followed up. And the state-level personnel filings? Prepped and queued, I said. But they require concurrent sign-off from both legal departments, plus the name of a designated oversight officer on record. You don't have one yet, which incidentally will block HRIS onboarding. The CFO from the buyer's side tapped the table. We haven't even appointed internal leads yet. I shrugged. Then you'll stall. They didn't argue, they took notes. Troy, meanwhile, looked like he was trying to manifest himself into a coffee mug. Darnell flipped to a new section in her binder. What about staff integration? You mentioned ownership migration. Are you referring to legal authority or day-to-day ops? Both, I replied. The authority flows downward, but without parallel structuring on operational oversight, the handoffs collapse. You're about 3 weeks behind on that, she blinked. Why hasn't anyone flagged that before? I looked at her then, deliberately at Mitch. Then at Troy. She followed my gaze and nodded. Message received. Someone near the window leaned toward his colleague and whispered, she built this. Not him. I heard it. Everyone did. But no one corrected him. 'Cause it was true. They started deferring to me after that. Subtly, at first. Questions directed my way. Timelines pulled from my docs. Darnell passed me her integration flowchart and asked for markups. I redlined the bottlenecks in 4 minutes flat. She looked down at the changes and smiled like someone finding the missing half of a jigsaw puzzle she'd blamed the dog for eating. One by one, they shifted. Not with applause. Not with formal titles. With respect. With deference. With realignment. The buyer's lawyer pushed her laptop forward. Can you verify these submission IDs for state filings? We want to confirm there were no mismatches. I pulled out my flash drive, plugged it into the USB port, opened a spreadsheet labeled State Filings Live with a timestamp from 4:12 a.m. last Tuesday. She stared at the document. You had this ready? No, I said. I had it finished. That's when the room changed for good. No one looked at Troy anymore. Mitch had receded into the upholstery. The buyer's entire team, legal, finance, integration, strategy, now orbited around a new center of gravity. Me. It wasn't ego, it was clarity. They didn't need someone to pitch them the merger. They needed the woman who had already kept it from falling apart, and they had her, sitting quietly, taking notes, fixing what they didn't even know they broke. End of that meeting, 3 different buyer reps asked for follow-ups with Jennifer included. Darnell handed me a printed schedule and asked where I'd prefer to sit during transition week. The lead counsel asked for private chat after lunch. One board member, still rattled, tried to pass me a note on a napkin. I didn't read it. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was essential. Not because they said so, but because the work proved it louder than any title ever could. It didn't collapse. That's the part no one expected. They all thought my entrance would be some kind of kamikaze mission, that I'd blow it up out of spite, take them down with me. But that was never the point. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. And I wanted the damn work done right. So when the acquirer's legal team pulled me aside after the session, quietly, formally, I didn't gloat. We'd like to extend you a consultant role during the integration period, lead counsel said, her voice clipped and professional but different. Not polite distant. Polite respectful. You'd retain access to all legal architecture, coordinate compliance transitions across entities, and she glanced at her laptop, already reading from the draft proposal, serve as our oversight liaison. I looked at the title. Strategic Integration Consultant Regulatory Oversight Authority. She caught the direction of my gaze. Yes, be assigned formal oversight authority. I didn't smile. I didn't raise an eyebrow. I just nodded, slow and deliberate. I accept, on one condition. She braced for it, probably expecting a demand for a raise, an apology, a new corner office. I want my original job title restored internally. No demotion, no restructuring, just correction. A pause, then done. The next board meeting was small, tense, and uncomfortable, held in a side conference room that smelled like printer ink and old secrets. Half the board looked like they'd chewed through their ties. The other half looked relieved someone else had taken the wheel. Mitch sat with his hands steepled, lips pressed so tight they looked stapled shut. Troy wasn't there. Sick, allegedly. I heard he tried to resign before HR even processed his expenses. He'll land somewhere else. They always do. The acquirer's legal head now seemed to control half the gravity in the room, laid out the integration terms. We are proceeding under the condition that Ms. Strauss be appointed oversight lead for the regulatory component of the transition. She will report to both internal leadership and our legal department directly. One of the older board members objected, barely concealing his irritation. You're proposing we give her sign-off authority again? No, she replied. We're not proposing anything. It's a term of acquisition. Another one, a woman whose name I could never remember because she always called me Janice, tried to save face. Well, this all feels hasty. The lawyer didn't flinch. It should have been done before the call. We're doing it now. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. Not because they liked it, but because they had no choice. I had become the clause they couldn't redact. I stood, nodded once, and left without shaking hands. Back at my desk, everything looked the same. The blinking overhead light, the printer's low-toner whine. Someone had eaten half my granola bar and left the wrapper. Probably Todd from compliance. He always thought shared fridge meant shared life. I opened my drawer, pulled out the seal, placed it back in its box, locked it. Then I held the token in my hand one last time. Cool, weighty, quietly indestructible, like me. I didn't post about it. No LinkedIn victory laps, no smug Slack messages. Just sat in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and reopened the transition map. Because the thing about power, real power, is that it doesn't need noise. It just needs to be seen. And for the first time in this company's history, they finally saw me. They moved the meeting to the executive conference room, the one with the frosted windows and anxiety-colored carpet where real decisions happen behind fake smiles. No assistants. No refreshments. 12 chairs, 12 nameplates, and 12 tight faces that hadn't slept much since the last time I opened my mouth. The acquirer's lead counsel walked in last. Briefcase. Blazer. Expression like steel polished to a mirror. She didn't wait for pleasantries. She pulled a manila folder from her bag and set it in the center of the table like it was a live grenade. This, she said, tapping the folder, is the final integration agreement. It includes oversight authority, internal access, and legal sign-off protocol. She didn't look at anyone but me when she added her oversight, her title. Mitch leaned back in his chair, already red in the face. We've already authorized her consultant role. This feels excessive. No, the lawyer said flatly. This is what's required. We will not close until it's signed as written. Board murmurs rose like steam from a cracked pipe. She's not C-suite. She's not even an officer of record. Never approved title elevation. The lawyer didn't flinch. She just pointed, slow and deliberate, at the token resting on the table between us. The same one that had derailed their little coronation weeks ago. That seal holds more weight than your position, she said to Mitch, her voice quiet as judgment. You built your house on her protocol. You don't get to board it up now that the lights are on. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Across the table, board chair shifted uncomfortably. And if we don't sign? She didn't answer. I did. I reached into my bag, pulled out the seal, set it on the folder like a final punctuation mark. Then you lose the deal. No shouting, no threats, just the sound of reality folding like cheap lawn furniture. They looked at each other like kids who'd been left home alone too long and finally realized the fire alarm wasn't a game. The lawyer leaned back, her job done. He didn't need to twist the knife. That was my claws, my hand. Mitch exhaled through his nose, trying to look composed. And what exactly is your price, Jennifer? I didn't hesitate. You mean besides the price of ignoring the one person who could have saved you 2 months ago? Silence. I want the original title reinstated, with retroactive authority. I want full visibility into the compliance org chart. And I want a reporting line that doesn't run through you. Swallowed? To who? The buyer's lawyer smiled faintly to us. The board didn't vote this time. There was no need. This wasn't a democracy. It was triage. They could keep the deal or keep their pride. They chose the money. I slid the seal across the table. Approve it. No applause. No standing ovation. Just 3 people reaching for pens while 2 others looked like they'd just tasted battery acid. Mitch didn't even touch his pen, just stared at me like he wanted to say something, anything. But the words got stuck somewhere between his ambition and his ego. I stood, didn't shake hands, didn't thank anyone. Just walked out of that room like I was turning off the lights on a stage where I used to sweep the floor. The hallway was quiet. My steps were soft, not because I was sneaking away, but because there was nothing left to prove. Behind me, the boardroom door clicked shut. No one followed. That was the best part. They knew I wouldn't be back in that room again, not like that. Not as a forgotten function in the org chart, not as a tool in someone else's hand. From now on, the signature wouldn't come last. It would come from me. Quiet, permanent, undeniable. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.